Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. And today we're about to get schooled. We're here with Jaclyn Johnson, who is the founder of Create and Cultivate and Cherub, something you guys might not know about until today. Jaclyn, it's so fun to have you here. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and it's really cool for me because you're somebody who I've turned to in a consulting capacity to sort of help me along as I'm launching the event side of Liberty Road. And so I'm going to be picking your brain from the point of view of knowing what we've talked about, but also from the point of view of our listener, who is a woman who's in her middle third, as we like to call it, who's perhaps trying to figure out what's next and what are the ways to get to that what's next. And I wanted to have you on here to talk about how you launched and grew Create and Cultivate and why you launched and are growing Cherub. So let's start with Create and Cultivate. For those few people that don't know what it is, tell us what it is.
Yeah, so Create and Cultivate is the largest media and events company for ambitious women. So we focus primarily on the career space. So whether you're launching a business or exiting a business, we want to be the go-to resource for you. I started it a trillion years ago, truly. I would say now almost 15 years ago, which is wild to say out loud because most businesses don't survive year two. So we're really fortunate that we've been able to build this amazing community. The company has gone through multiple iterations and changes, as you can imagine. And now we're most well known for our masterminds, retreats, and our large-scale festivals that we'll be launching.
Yes. And the iterations that you've gone through, although I remember your very first one at the Ace Hotel. It was at the Ace Hotel, right? And it was literally like a creative sort of outlet for people to come together. It was kind of community building in a sense too. What was the initial goal in Focus Create and Cultivate, in creating Create and Cultivate? And then how did that morph over the years?
Yeah, so much. So initially it was funny. It kind of started as this concept of a Renaissance women's getaway. And the idea was like, you get offline, you get away from your computer as like a creative entrepreneur, and we learn how to golf or smoke cigars or play poker, DIY like succulents, like whatever. And again, this is 2011. So this is a long time ago. And then when we started to kind of whittle down what we actually wanted to do and what was like interesting to the community was we found most of the women buying tickets were freelancers or entrepreneurs or small business owners or creatives in some capacity, because truly they were the only people who could take off work to go to Palm Springs Monday through Wednesday, right? This is back when office culture was very specific to going into the office. And so for that specific event, it was this combination of small business speakers, really fun and cool workshops, and then kind of getting your hands dirty with DIY crafts and things like that. That was the early iteration, I would say, of the event. The budget was zero. We literally used like neon electric tape to like design the walls. Like it was so janky in retrospect. But people loved it. People were really excited to get together and kind of have these conversations that no one was really having at the time. Over the years, it really grew and evolved. One sort of thread that kind of kept coming up was content creation. This was before influencers were influencers, before Instagram was Instagram. And so really it was kind of this come up of this trend of influencers. And so we focused heavily on content creation, creating a brand identity early on, while parallel pathing traditional business advice for women. So it was for small business owners, trademarking, legal, things like that. And those were the two tracks that we really focused on and the audiences we really attracted and grew. The event started very small, as you mentioned, like 20 to 30 people, then 50 to 70 people, 100 to 150 people. And then really that first big event we had, which was 350 people, was in 2015 in Los Angeles. And that event was the turning point, I think, for the business in terms of brand interest, in terms of talent interest, in terms of ticket sales, in terms of high quality production. And then 2016 is when I think we became more of like a household name, more of a staple as we grew and built the conference in different cities.
It's interesting to hear you talk about parallel pathing the content creation and the kind of go-to resource for these entrepreneurial women. Entrepreneurial mindset, I would say too, because a lot of those people probably didn't view themselves as such. And some may have been in ideation
Totally.
stage, some were freelancers. But when they came together, you sort of gave them this moniker that they could hang on to, and they were getting tools and resources and tips for all of it. But as you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, I remember that. I remember the very specific colors that you chose for your Instagram. And I remember hearing you talk about that. And I remember so much of it being geared towards what was happening in the millennial sort of space. I'm a Gen Xer, but I was very much keeping an eye out for what are these people doing and how is it that they're creating something that is such an enormous resource and telling of the times. Like you guys were iterating as things were changing. And there were some pretty big changes in social media, but in how we were doing business in general.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so fascinating because early days, 2011, 2012, 2013, even, the conversation around female entrepreneurship just like didn't exist. It wasn't something where there's now tons of resources, tons of conferences, tons of networks. Like it literally did not exist. And so coming out and being like the first two is scary, but it was also really exciting because we found so much momentum and so much want and need from the community. They were so excited to start having these conversations. Cut to, as we were growing the business, we started to hear more about women. There's the Women's March. There's women raising capital. There's women on the cover of magazines. Like all these things start happening parallel path to us building the business, which obviously adds to our success as we're growing and kind of having these conversations. But so in some ways, timing was really like great for us being like early to that market in a way, but we had to change over time. I mean, obviously, I would say like the biggest inflection points being, the Women's March, which was a huge moment for us, obviously. Then also 2020 and the pandemic and really servicing business owners in like a time of need and when everyone is scrambling to figure out how to run their company. And now again, being back like in the seat and saying, hey, like our woman has grown up. Like, she isn't necessarily just 25 and launching a company.
Yeah.
She's 45 and switching careers or just coming back from maternity leave or whatever it is. And how do we service her from launch to legacy, creating content specific to the entrepreneurial life stages that we're all going through?
Let's talk about 2020 because you're an events-based business. How do you navigate that? How did you navigate that? And what was beneficial to the brand during that time? We hear people all the time talking about like the heartbreak and the heartache of it, but what did it do to catapult you? First, answer the first question. Tell us how you navigated 2020.
Yeah, brutal. So top of 2020, Q1, our strongest quarter of the year. We host our largest event, like truly February 24th, like right under the wire of when everything kind of went crazy. We were on top of the world. We were going out to sell the company. We had a lot of interest, like all these things. I start to hear rumblings like early March, right? Of like, something's going on. But again, this wasn't like necessarily like we were still all like seeing each other. There was nothing in regards to
Sure.
like, isolating and things like that. We have a massive event at South by Southwest in Austin for mid-March. We have millions in dollars of sponsorship. We have 10,000 RSVPs. We've cut checks to all the vendors. Like we're good to go. Our team's booked. And I remember South by called a conference and we were like, okay, well, this is really going to dictate what's about to happen. And they're like,
Yeah.
we're moving forward. We're having the event. And we were all like, yes, amazing, great, perfect. Okay, we're good to go. Like all cylinders go. And then a day later, Austin County had a press conference. And I remember our entire team, all 30 people sitting in our conference room watching it when they're like, we're shutting it down. And I looked at my GM and my COO and I was like, everyone, let's just like let us game plan and we'll come back. And I remember in true CEO mode, and I think a lot of founders felt this way, where it was like, how do I problem solve this quickly? Okay, no problem. We're going to push everyone to Coachella. We have a Coachella event. And then we're going to push everyone to Dallas in the end of the year and this, that. And I'm like already like, here's everything we're going to do. And I like looked at my GM and I remember her being like, I just don't think there's going to be events for a long time. And I
Ugh.
was like, I cannot wrap my head around that. Like I cannot, as a business owner, I can't live in that world yet.
Yeah.
And it was the first 2 weeks, which was like the flatten the curve. We all like remember.
Yeah.
I was like, we're flattening the curve. It's going to be fine. We're transitioning. We're starting to figure stuff out. Unraveling that event was a true nightmare, as you can imagine, because every small business was fighting to keep every dollar they could, knowing what was about to happen, which is understandable. Sponsors, luckily for us, were like open to pivoting to a different event. And then, so we're working through all of that. And then again, the news of like, it's pretty much like everything's done. And so at that point, I remember my GM and COO, we came together and we were like, okay, let's pull the plug on like Coachella. Like we're just proactively pulling the plug. We know we have Dallas in September. Let's keep it for now. We'll see what happens. And they were like, you need to go home and like just like creatively ideate the way that you do and start like thinking through what you want to do. And basically the next 2 days I came back and I was like, we're going to do an online conference. We're going to do a conference around this like entire experience. We're going to talk about money. We're going to do this. And we built literally like on Squarespace, me and our event designer just like built this landing page, plugged in Zoom, learned how to use Zoom, recordings, this, that, book talent. We threw it together so quickly. And we were really lucky in that, like that was May 4th. So it was pretty fast turnaround. And we had a ton of sponsorship. It performed really well. We had 10,000 people tune in from 50 different countries. It was crazy and it was really successful, and Adweek wrote about it. And so we got lucky in that we became the experts in digital conferences because no one was doing that ever. So we started rolling out all these digital conferences. We kept getting sponsorship, which was great. People were spending money with us, which was awesome. So we actually ended the year pretty good. Like our revenue obviously decreased, but our profitability stayed the same because producing digital events, very cheap, very low cost. So that was great for us. What it taught us, and like the sort of silver lining, I would say, was it gave us a really good story. It gave us the story of we're a brand that people came to and stayed with, both on the sponsorship and audience side. Our membership ramped up to 7,000 to 10,000 people, I think, by the end of it. 10,000 people joined our membership, gave us, money to be part of our membership. They were spending with us during a time when no one was spending. Sponsors stayed with us and were happy with their digital experience. And our audience of maybe 1,000 people was now available to tens of thousands of people through the power of digital. So it provided us a narrative for selling or raising money or whatever to be like, not only is this brand so strong as an events business that we were able to do, I think, 9 million in revenue in a crazy year, we also were able to expand and grow in different ways. So mentally, I was not okay.
Sure, that's
Mentally,
insane.
yeah, it was insane. I was a shell of a human by the end of 2020 because obviously personally dealing with a global pandemic, being a business owner in the event space. Yeah, it was a lot.
It must have given you, though, I mean, you're not new to iterating. You talked about iterating within Create and Cultivate. You had sold a company prior to Create and Cultivate, but it must have been, in terms of the pivoting became very overused during this season, but it must have been a lesson in how to pivot when so much hung in the balance, so much of your audience, so much of your sponsorship money, so much of the brand's identity, and people were looking to you to see, okay, well, what are these guys going to do? How did that change your outlook as a CEO and a founder of a company and really an advisor to other companies?
Yeah, I think we were really lucky in that we were small, scrappy, and bootstrapped, which you would think would be a detriment in a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
But all of our like competitors, Refinery 29, even like a Forbes, a Pop Sugar, or whoever, who have massive venture backing, massive boards, massive hoops to jump through to get anything done. So for them to transition and pivot in that environment was impossible. It's so hard to do. The board approvals, the financials, the getting like all of that stuff takes forever. We were lucky in that our company was me. So I was like, guys, update, we're doing this, flip the script. Our event producers, now digital producers, like we're going to do this, that, the other. And everyone jumped in and was like, let's just figure it out. And we could move quickly and launch quickly. Was such a blessing in that moment because we were able to be the leader. And it was funny because, again, we didn't know what we were doing. We were also throwing stuff against the wall, as everyone was in those moments. But then afterwards to hear from like the Hearsts and the Condé Nast and everyone to be like, oh, wow, we all were looking at you and being like, how can we copy them on our like dinky Squarespace site that I'm like coding by myself? It was pretty wild, And I think we had cultivated the celebrity relationships that really, again, everyone wanted to kind of be helpful during that time. And we were able to pull talent like Chelsea Handler or Michelle Pfeiffer or whoever to come into the mix and do Zooms with us and be part of it. So again, it was like our relationships came into play. And I think, again, this is like a testament to like your reputation is your resume. Like I think people really respected Create and Cultivate and they like respected me as a leader. And so no one, I think, wanted to see us fail. And so people really came to came to us and like were supportive in a way that I was so grateful for. Like, whereas they could have very easily pulled out of sponsoring or speaking or whatever, and they all kind of came to the table to support us. And we're true to their mission because the reality is like people are sponsoring Create and Cultivate because they want to help small business owners or talk to small business owners and entrepreneurs. To then pull out of a sponsorship that is supporting a small business doesn't look that great. And look, people did it. Of course, I understand. But I think it actually made me respect our sponsors so much more for stepping up and putting their money where their mouth is to support what could have been a small business that went away very quickly in that situation.
Yeah, I want to say something that I think is really important for the listener to hear, which is that you're telling this story about what happened in 2020, about these celebrities who came alongside you, about these brands who respected you, sponsors who kept their money with you, after many, many, many years of proving what you could do as a business and how you guys actually had something that was sustainable prior to 2020. And I bet those people thought, and then after this, one day the pandemic's going to be over. This woman, Jaclyn Johnson, and her company, Create and Cultivate, are going to find a way to remain relevant and be in the minds of the people they're serving, a brand that they can trust. So we should hang in there too. I don't want people to hear what you're saying and see it as like, man, that sure worked out, because you take away
9 years in the making.
Yeah, exactly. I also want to say something else, which is a little counter to what you said, but I think it's worth noting. So I actually had an entrepreneurial consultant or a conference, and you know this, but in 2009, 10, and 11. And it was, I think the reason I bring it up is to say there are those of us who did have something going on. The magic of Create and Cultivate is that you guys did it consistently over and over and over, and you brought people along. It wasn't people like me who was a consultant in the space who said, hey, and wrote a book and was like, hey, let me capitalize on this and create something for a few years. You had a business of creating events for this demographic. So it's not just about being first on the scene, because there are people who were there. It's really about your consistency, the way you showed up, the way you grew your brand and your community and took people along for the ride. And that's really important and worth noting. You yourself said most businesses don't last past 2 years. And I think that's so much of the magic / not magic, just plain old hard work.
Totally. And also events are a brutal business, as you know. Like it is not for the faint of heart. Like I think a lot of women that I've also like talked to or started events, they do one and they're like, no thanks. And I get it. Like I get it. It's a really challenging business. And so I think, again, to your point, like longevity, consistency, and showing up is like the like hardest part of the job, right? You got to keep going. And like, that's just the reality. And it's live, it's chaotic, it's all the
Yeah.
things.
It's also the difference between success and failure. Like,
Mm,
it's just people who decide it's not, I shouldn't even say failure. I should say people who decide it's not for them
right.
and get out, and people who hang in there and are slightly crazy like me and obviously like you,
Yeah.
who are like, nope, we're gonna stick with this. Let's talk about selling Create and Cultivate, like basically building this baby and having somebody offer millions and millions and millions of dollars for it. What was that moment like, and how hard was it to give up?
Yeah, it was interesting. So we had multiple like sell periods. So we had initial offers in 2018, which were very early, I would say, and then we were very small at the time, and these were insane numbers people were throwing around. We're really excited, and we're like, oh my god, this is going to change our lives, all this stuff. Anyway, nothing ended up working out as happens. But lit the fire in like what we needed to do to get to that place, which was grow, scale, build more of a C-suite, take me more out of the weeds of like the business, build a sales team, all these things, which we focused on doing for the next couple of years. So top of 2020, again, on top of the world, absolutely killing it. We had another round of offers, really amazing offers, all these things. What ends up happening, which is frustrating, but also I do believe everything happens for a reason, is end of 2020 and during 2020, I should say, there was a lot of opportunistic M&A activity because a lot of companies were struggling. And so larger companies saw this as an opportunity to snatch up a lot of these companies for equity or whatever in that way. So we had a lot of people coming to us for that. And we're like, no, this is like a very real business. Like, we're not interested. By the end of 2020, there was like a shift in the M&A market where it was a bit more like opportunistic in the sense of like they were excited, there was cash again, people were interested. However, all the strategics that would have been interested in Create and Cultivate, which would have been the ideal exit to Hearst or Condé or Refinery 29 or whoever, are all struggling. Like, everyone's freaking out, like still hasn't recovered. However, the private equity markets were sitting on a ton of cash. So they're like, we need to start like diversifying. And Create and Cultivate was a really great private equity opportunity. High revenue, small overhead, large profit margins, big opportunity to grow, self-funded. We check all the boxes for private equity in a way. And so when private equity came into the mix, it was interesting for twofold. One was I was totally burnt out. So this is end of 2020. I'm like a shell of a person. I'm like, I'm here. I'll keep pushing this like rock up a hill for as long as you need me to. But long term, I think we should, especially if we're going in this new digital membership direction, bring on a different CEO who has experience in that. And they were aligned on that. We talked to a ton of different people. We ended up going with the firm that we thought was the best firm. Obviously, it was, exciting for me to finally exit and take cash off the table, having bootstrapped, put everything back into the company. And getting that deal over the line was hellish, but we did. We finalized that. They injected cash into the company. We started shopping for a new CEO. For 6 to 8 months, takes a while. Found that CEO, trained her, and then essentially I stepped away from the company, remained on the board, and in essence took a year and 8 months off from being in the day-to-day of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Letting go of it's bizarre because I think I was ready in many ways because I just was like so like drilled into the ground and like couldn't keep going and was really like, I used to love coming up with all the ideas and I just was like stifled. I just wasn't feeling motivated or excited at all. Part one. And then part two was so bizarre because you wake up every day for 11 years doing the same thing. And to wake up one day and just be like, I don't do the same thing anymore. It's a very jarring experience. And when your inbox is like 1,500 emails to one, you're like,
Yeah.
does anyone care about me? Hello? And then I'm like gardening, I'm cooking, I'm like trying to do all these things, but it's strange. Like my identity was very tied to the company. People still thought I was the CEO for like years after. Some people had no idea we sold the company. It was like, so it was a bizarre experience to be like getting emails that are like, hey, I'm at the loading gate. Are you here? And I'm like, oh no, I'm not.
I'm drinking a glass of wine in Napa.
I'm actually drunk. It's 2 p.m. No, but I was like, yeah. And it was just like, it is a very bizarre experience. But I'm happy I was able to go through that and experience it and then eventually obviously buy the business back.
And buying the business back was an opportunity you felt kind of infused with new ideas and wanted to redirect where the company was going, or they said, hey, we're going to move in a different direction. Do you want this back? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So it's kind of a combination of the two, I would say. So it was essentially like, they wanted to move on or start a secondary sale to someone else. A lot of the, things that had been implemented maybe weren't working the way that they thought it would.
Yeah.
And again, it was unexpected. And basically, in thinking about them selling to someone else, I kind of just had this realization where I was like, I feel like no one else can run this company, number one. Number two is I had started the Blueprint Mastermind with Marina Middleton and Allie Webb, which was like a small scale mastermind that we had started together that honestly blew up year one, was doing extremely well. And Marina Middleton was running it. Like really, Allie and I were supporting from talent marketing and obviously showing up and doing the masterminds. But she was this like whiz kid automations expert, amazing CEO, understood financials. And I saw a lot of myself in her, but also loved working with her. We had a great rapport. And so like doing this, and I was like thinking about the blueprint and create and cultivate, I was like, I feel like we can do this together. Like I think there's a big opportunity that Create and Cultivate missed with the smaller events, retreats, masterminds, more educational content, because they were so focused on the larger events, which makes sense. But like, again, having done the blueprint, I was like, wow, this opens up a whole new world to me of like a different type of content, but still in the same vein of what we're doing. And so I went to Marina and I said, this opportunity has arisen, whatever. And I don't want to do it by myself, but I think if you're interested, I'd be interested in doing this together. And like this is what my expectation was, because I wanted to go into it with very specific boundaries. Like as mentioned, I'm going into my middle third. Like I don't need to be running a startup, like day two employee, like type thing. And I said, like you would be the CEO. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'll contribute. Here's where I think, the direction of the company should go. If we're aligned on all these things and you're ready to grind it out with me for the next 5 to 10 years, like, let me know. And she immediately called me and was like, I'm in. So we ended up negotiating and navigating this really insane deal for the next 2 months, and ended up getting it back through a series of kind of miracles, frankly. And we were like, all right, day one of a company that's existed for 15 years, like, or whatever, what do we do now? And that's kind of how we approached it, is like, if I could start Create and Cultivate today knowing everything I know, what would I do differently? And that's how we're kind of approaching it.
That's amazing. And I encourage people to check it out and see how it's remained the same in that it's serving that similar audience, but that it's changed in that it's going much deeper into the type of content that you're providing. Now, I know you have the festival coming up, and that's something else that you and I have talked about. We hope to do something very similar in the midlife space. But before we jump into that, let's talk about Cherub for a second. So you basically have gone through all the things. You've sold one company, you've sold a second company, you bought back that second company. You've learned through the various opportunities for other businesses or other opportunities to sell the company. You've learned what hasn't worked, what needs to work, what companies are looking for in terms of acquisition, companies that are acquiring you. What then leads you to say, you know what, I really want to play in this sandbox a little bit more, and support female founders who were in the situation I was in? Like, what is that conversation in your head?
So it was really interesting because, like, to your point, I'd been a bootstrap CEO. I'd sold to a strategic. I'd sold to private equity. I ran a $20 million fund for a little bit. So I've been on the venture side. I've personally angel invested in 25 different companies. So I've seen the perspective of all different ways to enter and exit a business market. I started coaching during like post-pandemic after selling the company. And every single person I talked to who was like an amazing founder, doing really cool things, having traction, was like, I'm going to go raise venture capital. And I was like, okay, how much money do you need? And they'd be like $100,000. I was like, okay, well, you don't raise venture capital on $100,000. Like, venture is for the millions, and it's for like taking your company from 0 to $1 trillion. Like, if you just need $100,000 to get you to $500,000 in revenue, that's not venture. But I said, that's angel investors, right? And everyone's next question was, okay, well, cool. where are the angel investors? And I was like, oh, LinkedIn DMs. I don't know. Like you kind of have to like find
Yeah.
them. And it kept happening over and over and over again to the point where I actually started a little email list for some of the angels I knew, and I would send them deals I would get. And if anyone was interested, I'd introduce them. And it kind of became this thing. And one of my friends, Angeline, who's now my co-founder at Cherub, and I were walking and I said, oh, I actually got a cool deal. I'll add you to my angel investor list if you're interested. And she was like, I would love to angel invest. Like she's been so successful in her career. She had an amazing windfall being like number 2 at a company that was acquired and then IPO'd. She's super strategic, has incredible experience. And she's like, I would love to write checks, but like no one's emailing me. No one knows who I am. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, that's so interesting. Like everyone's missing each other, you know what I mean, in a way. And so after our hike or whatever, she messaged me and was like, should we build something that fixes this? And I was like, let's do it. Cut to, we launched like a little landing page for our angel newsletters. Anyone interested in getting deal flow? We get 1,500 signups in 2 weeks. We basically use that momentum to put together an alpha product using no code platforms to kind of string together a process where we can promote companies, tee up intros, and like full circle, see if people get invested in. We put 40 brands through the newsletter. Of those 40, 100% got deck views from investors that they
Wow.
otherwise would not have. 50% got meetings with investors that they otherwise wouldn't have. And 20% were funded in 3 months or less for their company. And we were like,
Wow.
like there's something here. And so based off that data, we were able to raise $1.7 million from angel investors ourselves, build our beta product, which is now live, and create basically this community that connects angel investors and entrepreneurs using sort of dating app mechanics. Like,
Yeah.
here's my company, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm looking for. On the investor side, I'm looking to invest in female-founded brands or CPG brands or brands doing $1 million in revenue. If it's a double opt-in, you can connect and you do the deal offline. So it's all membership-based. There's no fees taken off top or anything like that. And since that inception, we've had $2 million deployed to brands through Cherub introductions.
That's amazing. It's amazing, and um, it's the continuation of the create and cultivate story. But I feel like it's putting I don't know if it's your money where your mouth is, but it's basically bridging the gap that you saw firsthand in create and cultivate as you were educating people, as you were becoming a resource to people, and you started to really pay attention to what the pain point was. And it's a pain point. It continues to be a pain point for so many. And we've heard all the statistics around 2 and under 3% for women getting this money. And I know Cherub isn't focused on women only, but it's so nice that there is an opportunity for people to turn to something like Cherub, and it's not overwhelming. It doesn't feel like I need to understand everything there is to understand about raising capital, and having access to you as somebody who can sort of direct their path and say, you know what, this isn't a VC type of deal. This is more of an angel opportunity. That's huge. To have that understanding and to have somebody who's speaking to you in pedestrian language is
Totally.
huge.
And it's wild too, because also the VC market has changed so much in the last like 4 years. Like it used to be so easy to get cash. And now if you aren't doing $1 million in revenue, like they won't even talk to you, even if they're early stage or, it doesn't matter. Like we've experienced that. And like, I can't even imagine, I'm a well-connected person. I can't even imagine what it's like for anyone else who maybe isn't in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York. Like it's so challenging, which is why the numbers, to your point, are so upsetting and disappointing to see, but they exist for a reason. All of these things are happening in a microcosm. So how do we democratize funding for everyone to at least get in the room and pitch, right? Like that's at the end of the day. We can't guarantee you're going to get money on Cherub, but we can guarantee you have the opportunity to get in the room and pitch. And like that alone is so valuable.
Are you still offering your it was just Jaclyn Johnson doing like a mastermind kind of thing? It was like $1,000 or something.
Masterclass. Yeah. So I have a fundraising masterclass, and I honestly did that because every single coaching session I had was having questions around fundraising. And I think honestly, every entrepreneur, even if you're never going to fundraise a day in your life, should take it because it
Yes.
really breaks down the jargon, the need to knows about your business, what they're looking for in a business to invest in, what they're looking for in a business to sell, what your pitch deck should be like. It has all these different things that you could break down. And I just think it's really valuable to be able to speak the language, no matter what room you're in, no matter how big your business is, or if you're ever going to sell.
Yeah, that was the reason I brought it up. I thought it was a really helpful tool. I got the benefit of you walking me through it when we were consulting, but it's a really beneficial tool that people can have in their back pocket for a really long time and refer to, because sometimes we talk about needing money, needing capital, an infusion of capital in our businesses, and we don't really know how to go about that or the kind of capital that we need. And there's so many ways to skin that cat. So it's a really helpful tool. Let me ask you really quickly, what do you think has changed in the landscape, the entrepreneurial landscape for women in the last 15 years? What do you see happening now that you didn't see happening not when you launched Create and Cultivate, but when you really started to focus on entrepreneurship in Create and Cultivate?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, there's just a ton more resources, which is great. I think also there's a lot more mandates in place on both the fundraising side and the hiring side and all these things to spend with women-owned businesses, which again is amazing, especially when people implement them. I think in terms of like venture and all these things, I think it's actually been declining in terms of the amount of money we're seeing raised, which is so frustrating. But that being said, I think women need to be educating themselves more and more as business owners of the possibilities and opportunities that are out there, because there's so many things that you could be doing and so many tools that you could be using to increase the value of your business, automate it more, create systems and processes that take you out of, again, that day-to-day grind that we're all dealing with. So I think like in terms of the landscape, that's what I've seen. I would say also there's been a kind of shift from specifically beauty and fashion and things that like obviously we've seen so many women starting up these companies into AI technology systems, things of that nature, which is amazing. It's great to see diversification. Like we have some amazing female founders on Cherub that are AI founders, amazing. Like, so I love seeing that transition and shift outside of the traditional categories that we tend to play in, which are fine, albeit somewhat overcrowded these days. The other thing I would say is there's been, even though VC deal making has decreased, angel investing amongst women has increased, and they tend to invest in other women, which is amazing to see.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, both in having people like yourself who are angel investors who are starting to say, "Hey, if you hear of anything, let me know. I'm interested in focusing my money on other female founders." And interestingly enough, as much for supporting other women as for making that, using it as an investment tool, which is really interesting to me. Like the people who are just coming out in support of other women and using their dollars to do that, which I think is amazing. You talked about burnout, and now you have two businesses. And you're still coaching, and there's a lot, you're in this multi-hyphenate sort of space. How is it that you're protecting yourself from burnout?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think this time around, there's like a few different things I have in place. One is I have operational CEOs at both companies that are in the day-to-day, that are like in their era of like wanting to build and grow a company. And it's like, for them, it's like their day-to-day, they're so excited. Whereas like I'm more a little bit off to the left, I guess, in a sense, where I'm supporting on specific things, but I'm not the day-to-day decision maker on every single decision within the business. I don't have anyone that reports to me at either company. I just work directly with the CEOs and presidents and things like that, and obviously chat with the staff. And I'm more high-level strategy than I am tactical execution. Second is like I have these very specific boundaries in place that I've been really clear about. Like for me, I want to be able to travel whenever, however I can, go on trips, meet with my friends, like take amazing opportunities. A good example is like we just got emailed from the tourism board of Singapore, so random. But for Create and Cultivate to go on a girls trip, me and Marina. And at first, Marina was like, I don't know the business. I was like, girl, these opportunities are like once in a lifetime. Like trust and believe, we need to go on this trip. It's going to be so many amazing memories. Like I want to be able to like live my life to the fullest, because I, for 10 plus years, didn't. I need to make time for, and my other boundaries are like exercising. Like it's something I'm really passionate about. It's like making time for fitness. I definitely, my health threw it to the wayside while building the company. So being really cognizant of like health. And then now like dating, which is like a crazy thing, but like making time for dating has been like kind of an interesting thing. So I have these boundaries. I will say I love working. So like waking up and having purpose and being on calls and doing that, I love it. But I know myself. And so I have to put these boundaries in place to prevent me from getting to that other side of anxiety and burnout. And so I think also like for me, the stakes are a little lower than the stakes are for them in that way. Obviously, I'm always operating at 1,000% for every company. But like, I think when all of your personal wealth and your entire identity is wrapped up in one thing, like you put so much pressure on yourself to perform. And that was me for so long until obviously the exit. And now I have like diversification. I have multiple projects. I have a lot going on in little areas that I'm able to be part of, which makes me feel more at peace about not having all my eggs in one basket.
It's amazing to have that list of boundaries. It's altogether a different thing to actually put them in place, right?
Yes.
And it's a daily practice every day to say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this particular project or this particular conversation, or I can really help somebody move the needle over here. But I need to get to these other things that I have committed to myself. So kudos to you for making that list and sticking to it. I have to ask you this question because you've had success now multiple times, right? This is not an accident. But would you say, or let me ask it this way, do you think that your success has been right place and right time, or do you think it's been pure hustle?
Oof. Definitely a combination. I think it'd be silly to say it's not right place, right time. I think the way you show up, I think the way you can see the white space where you're like, that's an opportunity and take it. And then from that moment on, it's all grit and hustle and determination and like truly unnerving drive to get you to that place. However, I do think I've been really good at spotting and understanding timing, pivoting when needing to, and all those different things. But luck always plays a role, I think, at the end of the day, when you're building something in life in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And being prepared, right? We hear that all the time, being prepared for those moments. Thank you for being honest about that. I appreciate it. And then I have to ask you before I let you go, because I have a million other questions, but we got to keep this tight. What is it about Create and Cultivate, about Cherub, about the work you're doing, I would say as an advisor, as an angel to other small businesses? What is it about all of that work that has liberated you, Jaclyn Johnson, the woman?
Yeah, I think it's so funny because I think growing up and like being on my own since 18, always carving my own career path, doing everything, and really like, again, not having the network or connection that a lot of people had as I grew up and kind of realized like, oh, a lot of these things are based on relationships or who you know. And I was like, cool, I know no one. And so getting into these rooms and growing and seeing how everything works, I felt compelled to pass it on, and because other people have the same opportunities I had and the same information that they're armed with going into these rooms, because there is such a gap in who you see on like raising hundreds of millions of dollars, who went to Wharton, who have, those are built-in connections that they're going to have. And there's so many amazing people that deserve, again, a seat at the table, an opportunity to be a pitch in the room that will never get it just based on maybe their geographical location or like their story thus far. And so for me, my life's work, I feel like, has been helping underrepresented founders get access to the information they need to be successful. I can only help so much. Again, it all comes down to your own grit, determination, and luck. But giving you the information you need to get in the room to be successful is the most important piece. And I had people do that for me along the way. And I want to do that at scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And the ironic thing in it is that you being liberated by all of this is liberating so many other people.
I hope so.
It is. It is. Thank you, Jaclyn, for taking the time to hang out. It's always good to see you. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. And thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Liberty listeners, thank you guys for hanging out with Jaclyn and with me. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now.